Today we're talking about photography equipment failure in your landscape photography, and are you prepared? So this wasn't the video I planned on making on this trip, but after a critical piece of photography equipment failed on me relatively early on in this trip, I thought it'd be an interesting topic for this week's video. So as landscape photographers that go out on trips, we often have contingency plans and things to help reduce risk of equipment failure while we're out. We spend a lot of money on trips, we spend a lot of time on travel, so you want to sort of make sure things go well when you're out there and you don't have something break on you that leaves you sort of high and dry. For me, that often means choosing lenses that complement each other, or having sort of a strategy in my head. If my wide angle quits working, what would I do? Or if my telephoto quits working, what would I do? And sort of having some thoughts and plans around that. You know, spare batteries, spare memory cards, everything like that. I actually carry a secondary camera body with me on most trips, so that way if something happens with my main camera body, I still have a second camera body to work with. These are all thoughts and considerations that go into maximizing the success of your trip and reducing the risk. So on this trip, my ball head actually broke, and I really just wasn't expecting it. And really, this is no fault of the ball head whatsoever. In fact, this Interol N44, I've done a video about it. I'll link to the description below. It's been rock solid for me. This is really just my own accident that caused it to break. But essentially, and I wish I had a super interesting story for this, but what happened is it fell out of the forerunner, and unfortunately, it landed right on the tensioning knob. So when it did that, it bent that, and it bent it in. And so now, when I got out in the field, I couldn't tighten it all the way. So I would put my camera on it, and try to tighten it, but because it's bent, it won't thread in all the way, and I can't get a good clamp on the camera. So the ball head is essentially non-functional for me right now. So it took me by a little bit of surprise. Now on this trip, I do actually have a spare tripod. Unfortunately, it is my video tripod, which is really made for lightweight gear, such as this Pocket 3 I'm recording this on, or my Nikon Z30. It's a lightweight tripod. It's got a really simple ball head on it, and it's super lightweight, so I can carry two tripods in the field without having too much weight, but it's not really made to hold my Nikon Z7 IIs. You know, a 24 to 120 in the Z7 II, it's okay. Put a 100 to 400 on, and you can watch it wiggle around a lot. But the other unfortunate piece of this, I hadn't realized that the fall out of the forerunner had damaged the ball head till I was already out on a trail. So we'd hiked up this trail. I'd actually taken this tripod off my pack and left it in the forerunner because I wasn't going to do any video on this portion of the hike. So I'm up there, and we get to our first scene, and I'm looking at it, got my composition all figured out, and I sit down, try to attach my camera, and find out my ball head's bad. We'd hiked in far enough, I didn't really feel like going back to the forerunner to go get my video tripod to use as a sort of a workaround, so I just sort of had to come up with ways to deal with it. So unfortunately, this particular area was an area of cascades, flowing water, so I was going to be doing some long exposures, and I was going to be doing focus stacking because we were going to have the rocks and boulders in the stream and sort of get it all focused all the way back. So it's pretty inconvenient not to have a tripod. But I think there's a lesson here, and I sort of wanted to walk you through what I did, what my thoughts and approach to this were, and how to deal with equipment failure in the field. So first, I think attitude is important. When I found out that this ball head was damaged and it wasn't going to hold my camera, it would have been real easy to get doom and gloom and think the whole trip is ruined, and what am I doing out here, and I wasted all this time, wasted all this money. But that's really just not the case. What I did is I take a little bit of time and just pause for a moment. Okay, what's the situation here? I can't clamp my camera to the ball head. That's a problem. What are my solutions? What are my backups? Do I have something else in my pack? No. On that particular hike, I didn't have anything else in my pack that would work, but I did know in the forerunner, I've got my video tripod, and while it's not the ideal tripod for the stills photography that I do, it would be a workable solution for the rest of the trip. So with that, I knew the whole trip isn't ruined. I just need to solve the problem of here I am with these cascades, this flowing water, focus stack type situations where I'm going to want to be able to photograph, and what can I do to work around that? So I pause a little bit more and think about it. Okay, this is a great chance to practice many of the things I've talked about on this channel. Vibration reduction, it really lets you use a slower shutter speed. I've done tips on how to do handheld photography. I've talked about all this stuff before. Is it my ideal way of doing photography in these settings? No. I would much rather have my tripod and my ball head working so I can do exactly what I want in the style I'm used to. But with that said, I've got these tips and tricks to fall back on, and that's what I did. I just embraced it. In the short term, for the rest of this hike, while I'm photographing cascades and water, I am going to lean into shooting handheld. I'm going to lean into using the vibration reduction, the image stabilization to be able to have a longer shutter speed than I might otherwise normally be able to do. I'll practice my bracing techniques, and we'll go from there. And that's really what I did. Just embrace it in the short term. None of this is unsurmountable challenge. There's tips and techniques to sort of work through it, and that's what I did. I just embraced it. Now it took a little bit to fall into the rhythm of getting the right settings of what shutter speed do I need and where's that overlap of the shutter speed where I think the water looks okay and then I can actually feasibly hand hold it. But I found it. It took a little bit, but once I had it, I really was able to work through the rest of that stream in a manner that I feel like was doing okay. Like I said, it's all about attitude. I went into it, something broke, I'm just gonna roll with it. I'm gonna figure it out, I'm gonna figure out how to move forward, and I'm gonna get some pictures from this spot, and the whole trip is not ruined because I do have a spare back in the 4Runner. Now, flexibility is important too. Like I said, that sort of goes in with attitude, but I think if you have good attitude, the flexibility sort of follows in naturally. And that flexibility was moving towards handheld photography and, you know, embracing it and just moving for it. I can be flexible and use that form of photography even though I don't have my tripod available to me. So photographing moving water I didn't think was too horribly difficult. It was just really sort of figuring out where that mix is of slow enough shutter speed so the water looked good, but fast enough that the image stabilization could help save me in that. Where it was really a challenge was with the focus stacking, because I don't do a lot of handheld focus stacking. Like I said, ultimately I'm a lazy photographer and I don't like to focus stack a whole bunch anyways. And when I do focus stack, I really just sort of want it to work, which I can do off of a tripod nice and easy. But if it's handheld, you know, now I've got some movement and shake, I've got to move a focus point. But I'm flexible. I tried it. It was a great chance to practice it. Now, I haven't looked at the pictures yet to see how my handheld focus stacks look. I probably won't have them put together for this video, but, you know, I tried it. I tried to roll with it and try to do some handheld focus stacks. Now, another piece where the flexibility sort of really factors in, I was out with another landscape photographer who was super kind, super generous, and immediately upon seeing I had a damaged ball head that I couldn't use, offered to share his tripod with me. And that's pretty awesome. It pays to have good friends that'll help you out in a situation like that. Now, with that said, obviously, when I have my own tripod, I can work different compositions, try different compositions. Me, I was trying to not hog his tripod. So what I would do is I would use handheld, I'd find my compositions, I'd figure out where would a tripod be super helpful, or which was my favorite composition where I really wanted to sort of try to get a good chance of getting it. And then that's when I would borrow his tripod. I'd have my one composition figured out, I would do my focus stack, maybe I would play with my shutter speed a little bit more, just so I didn't monopolize his tripod. He was being generous enough to let me borrow his tripod while I was photographing these cascades. I figured what I can do is try to line up my compositions first. That way when I borrow it, I only need to borrow it for like a few minutes, couple minutes, 5 minutes, and then I could give it back to him so it didn't infringe quite as poorly on his landscape photography. Luckily, he likes to shoot abstracts as well, so he had plenty of things to fill his time with while I was using his tripod. But being flexible is important to this as well. It just allows you to change, adapt, and move from there. Like I said, we all know I love to shoot on tripods, but if you're flexible, it's okay. You can do it slightly different. So flexibility is an important trait as well when you're facing equipment adversity. So next up is we got gear strategy. Ultimately, I think attitude is most important. If you've got a negative attitude when you have a piece of equipment failure in the field, you're going to be stuck. You're just never going to get out of a negative headspace to come up with a solution. So if you have a good attitude, I think that's what sets the stage. Flexibility is being able to get away from, I have to have my tripod to shoot. Hey, I can be flexible. I can shoot handheld, and I'm going to make the most of it. But then we move into the gear strategy. How do I try to make sure this doesn't happen before? I actually used to carry 2 full-size tripods on trips, and I would have a ball head on the other one just because I used to try to protect against this. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because when I've started moving into some of the FLM tripods where I feel like they're just super rigorous, super rugged, and I can't imagine them letting me down. Similar with this NRL N44 ball head. It's a great ball head. I'm going to buy another one to replace it. I have nothing against it. It just got me into a place of feeling like everything was great, couldn't possibly break. And then when I do something stupid and drop it and it lands right on that tensioning knob for the clamp, I didn't expect that to happen. So when it comes to gear strategy, I think it takes some time to sort of sit down and think and review your setup. Is it as strong as you think it is? I probably should have realized, hey, what would happen if my main tripod died? These days I carry a much lighter weight video tripod. It's not quite a fully acceptable tripod for my stills photography. It'll limp by, but it's not the best. So think about that. You know, do you carry spare batteries? Do you carry spare memory cards? Do you have charging capability? Do you have spare charging capability? Do you have the spare tripod, the spare ball head, things like that, if you have the opportunity and luxury to do so? So moving forward, I will be starting to carry an additional second tripod and ball head with me on trips. Now, I actually have plenty of tripods at home. We've seen my tripod reviews. I talk about tripods. My friends give me a hard time because I have too many tripods. I just didn't happen to bring it on the trip. So what I'll probably do is take one of my tripods, set it aside, make it a Forerunner tripod so that anytime I'm in the Forerunner, there's actually one squirreled away somewhere so that if a situation like this happens, I have a spare. But you can do that with any sort of gear. In this particular case, what caught my attention was spare ball head. I didn't have one, and I had to, fall back on the video tripod and ball head. Moving forward, that's one of the gaps I'm going to solve. But maybe your gaps are different. Maybe you have two tripods. Maybe there's something more critical. We've talked about it. I always carry a second camera because I want the redundancy. I want the backup. I always shoot cameras with dual card slots just because I put a lot of time and money into travel, that I just want all my stuff to work so that I can get the photos I want. So it might be worth taking your time to really think about what you're taking in the field and what are your critical pieces to success, and do you have fallback plans, redundancy plans. Sometimes it's just a plan. Maybe you don't have that piece of gear, but you have how you would handle it. Maybe you already have just in your head, you can't afford a second tripod and ball head, but you practice your hand holding skills so that if it ever happens, you're better prepared to fall back to that and be able to use that to protect yourself against gear failure. I mean, one of those things you could consider while you're evaluating your strategy is don't set your tripod precariously in your Forerunner where it's going to fall out. Doesn't cost any extra money to do that. Just be a little more careful and your gear might stand a little better chance of surviving. So gear failure strategy isn't necessarily always going out and buying doubles of everything. It may just be thinking about, if this fails, then what? That way, when it happens in the field, you aren't taken by surprise and you have a plan for what you're going to do. So there it is, gear failure in the field, and some strategies I think and some tips I think can help you if it happens to you on how you can sort of overcome that hurdle, move forward, and still get some pictures out there. So in this case, for me, it was a ball head. It could have been much worse. I was able to work around it and get through it. And maybe you're in a situation where you only have one camera and you don't have a secondary camera body. But again, from my gear strategy section, just think about what you'd do if that happened. Maybe you can practice with your phone and learn how to get some pretty decent shots with it. If I was up there with one camera body and something happened to it, then I would roll back to my phone. I would use it and maximize it and do the best I could do with the phone. The key is, again, it's the attitude. If my attitude was bad, you'd be going, oh, the phone is terrible. It's never going to do great. I'll never come away with anything. But the phones are pretty great these days. And if you have a positive attitude, you can really make even that work while you're out in the field. And there have been times when I used a phone for my video side of the world. When I Rocky Mountain Park trip, I tried to take out just action cameras and they could not hold a battery. My GoPro would die. I've talked about that and complained about that. But I ended up filming most of that vlog off of my phone. So it's a case where I went from a camera that I thought was going to serve me to using my phone, and I made it work. I'll link to that video down in the description below as well, that Rocky Mountain vlog. And like I said, probably 85% of that was shot on an iPhone. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's video. This wasn't the video I planned, but when I had that ball head fail, I just thought it'd be a good topic. Talk a little bit about how you got through it, how attitude helps, how flexibility helps, how having a gear strategy helps, and hopefully it'll help you. I highly recommend you take that time, sit down, think about your critical pieces of equipment. What would you do if a certain key piece worked? Again, doesn't always mean you need a second piece of equipment. It can make it easier, but you can have other workarounds in case you're budget restricted to have that equipment. The key is think about it, be prepared, and plan for it. That way, if something happens while you're traveling to your camera gear or a critical component of your camera gear, you've got options and a way to proceed. So anyways, if you like today's video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see future landscape photography content from me, including tips, tricks, behind the scenes, and many gear reviews, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you for watching.